Miami just knocked out the defending national champion Ohio State Buckeyes. The Hurricanes won the game not just because they're the most physical team in the country, but because they're balanced and they're resilient.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy New Year to all, and this is the happiest of New Year's. You get to start out 2026 with the Miami Hurricanes now as one of the final four teams standing in America. We'll find out the other three, and we'll find out Miami's next opponent throughout the day today. I am Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, co-host of Locked On ACC, and host of Postgame on the Hurricanes radio network. And thank you sincerely to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen. We're available wherever you get your podcasts. We're on YouTube. We're part of the #1 Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. On this loaded episode, as we react to Miami's 24-14 win in the Cotton Bowl against Ohio State, Hurricanes had to match up against the defending champions. All of that talent, Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, Caleb Downs, Julian Sayin, who was one of the best quarterbacks in the country throughout the year. The Hurricanes managed to persevere. We'll talk on this episode about how the vision of head coach Mario Cristobal is being realized in a big way here in his fourth season. Now, obviously, there's still work to do if Miami wants to hoist their sixth national championship, but to this point, this Hurricanes team has exceeded all expectations already. Let's keep it rolling. We'll revisit my pregame keys to the game and how Miami did. Spoiler alert, Miami accomplished every one of my keys to the game except for one, but that one was not enough to lose that football game. But let's talk about why Miami managed to pull it off 24-14 against Ohio State. Because again, folks, obviously the physicality had a lot to do with it, but it wasn't just that. But let's start with the fact that Miami, I think, clearly has cemented themselves to this point as the most physical football team in the country when it comes to the offensive lines, the defensive lines, the trenches, the point of attack. The Hurricanes sacked Julian Sayin 5 times in the game. And yeah, the key players, the ones everybody talked about, they stepped up. Rueben, Bain, and Akheem Mesidor accounted for 3 of those sacks. Mesidor with 2, Rueben, Bain with 1. Mesidor doesn't get talked about enough, by the way. And as far as sacking Julian Sayin 5 times, I know that that's something that Indiana managed to do. So we visited that as one of our points of the Indiana blueprint, right? If Indiana showed you how to frustrate Ohio State's offense and how to beat that team, you've got to get to Julian Sayin and make him uncomfortable. Miami did it. So with Miami sacking Sayin 5 times, Indiana had done that 5 times at OSU's previous loss. This is an Ohio State team that had only given up 6 sacks during their first 12 games, and Miami goes out and grabs 5. Hurricanes also had 7 tackles for loss in the game. Josh Pate from On3 said it best during that first half. Julian Sayin was living in hell for that first half. Like, no time to make decisions. He was uncomfortable because Miami was making him uncomfortable. And, you know, when we talk about the Hurricanes defense, I mean, folks, everybody, rightfully so, tremendous player. When you're talking about defensive backs leading into that game, everybody was talking about Caleb Downs for the Ohio State Buckeyes. But I think it's safe to say Miami's Keionte Scott had the best DB performance on that field last night. Keionte Scott's season was supposed to be over about 6 weeks ago with his toe injury, but this guy tirelessly and relentlessly worked his way back, and he's leaving his mark in the playoffs. Had a tremendous game against Texas A&M, and he goes out there, Keionte Scott. He read Julian Sayin perfectly to intercept the bubble screen that he takes for over 70 yards for a pick 6. Keionte Scott, phenomenal. You think about how important it's been to get that young man back for the playoffs. He has been helping Miami now get to one of the final 2 games of the college football playoff. The Hurricanes are a semifinalist. He has a lot to do with it. Hurricanes are now 6-0 against ranked opponents this year and 3-0 against top 10 opponents. leading up to the game, I saw a lot of college football fans who were like, how's Miami going to beat Ohio State when they can't beat Louisville and they can't beat SMU? Listen, couple things, folks. Number one, the ACC probably a little bit underrated. Just going to throw that out there. And then the other more important thing is this is not the same Miami Hurricanes team that lost to Louisville and lost to SMU. This is a team that is as healthy as they've been all season long. Clearly a team that has found adjustments with their coordinators, Shannon Dawson, and especially Corey Hetherman on defense, who's just done an A++ job throughout the year. And all of Miami's most important players are playing their best football at the end of the season. So you can't just look back and say, hey, you lost to Louisville, so how are you going to beat Ohio State? This is a different Miami than the one we saw a couple of months ago, folks. And, so the Hurricanes in this one, we did have to sweat, right? Miami had jumped out to after the pick 6 by Keionte Scott, which came after a glorious offensive drive and a 9-yard touchdown reception from Mark Fletcher from Carson Beck. We had to sweat because Ohio State's offense adjusted in the second half. The 12 personnel with 2 tight ends on the field, Miami didn't have an answer for that right away. And Ohio State managed to get physical. They started to run the football effectively, which they could not do in the first half. They were in negative rushing yardage in the first half. So finding that rhythm on offense, it took pressure off of Sayin, and it gave their offense some rhythm, okay? But after Ohio State scored 2 touchdowns to get to 17-14, Miami's defense counterpunched. Corey Hetherman, who, Miami needs to back up the Brinks truck and offer this dude as long of a contract as you possibly can. Miami's DC adjusted, the personnel adjusted, and the Hurricanes got stops on the final 2 Buckeyes possessions, including an interception by Jacoby Thomas. With Miami's physicality, folks, also comes balance, because it's not just Hurricanes pushing you around at the line of scrimmage. One of our big questions before the game was, can Miami run the football against Ohio State's defense? Nobody else this season outside of Indiana could do that. Indiana rushed for 118 yards against Ohio State. Ohio State was giving up on average just 85 rushing yards per game. The Hurricanes put up 153 as a team. Mark Fletcher, by the way, Fletcher, you talk about Keionte Scott, how important he's been in these playoffs so far. Mark Fletcher is right there with the likes of Scott, Bain, and Mesidor. Fletcher runs for 90 yards in this game, and against Ohio State, those are tough yards. As an individual, he ran for more yards than they give up in team yards per game this season. And Fletcher had some big chunk plays late in the game. He set up Miami's final scoring drive with a 19-yard gain. I mentioned he caught the touchdown pass earlier that put Miami up 7-0. You also had Marty Brown, who comes on late in the game with fresh legs in the fourth quarter. He runs for 26 yards on the final drive, including the game-sealing 5-yard touchdown that made it 24-14 Miami. Credit to Miami's offense, because they didn't have a lot of momentum on that side of the football when they were up 17-14. We were all thinking, man, we're going to have to sweat out the final couple of possessions. Carson Beck, Fletcher, and company had their best drive and their most important drive late in the game to seal it. And as far as Beck goes, another game where he didn't light up the stat sheet, but he managed the game magnificently. The box score watchers are going to say, well, he only threw for, 138 yards. It's not that good. But, man, the context of these games against A&M's defense and against Ohio State's defense is so important. I would say Beck managed the game magnificently. He didn't hit on his deep shots last night, but in taking some of those, he did force Ohio State to defend the entire field. And at least one of those deep shots to C.J. Daniels should have earned Miami a pass interference. So the officials kept their flags in their pocket almost every single time. Another one that stood out about Carson Beck, when he ran the football on that 3rd and 12 to pick up the first down, and usually like regular season Carson Beck would have slid and maybe not picked up the whole 12. Postseason Carson Beck puts his body on the line to make sure he got that yardage. I've never seen him run so hard. This is a man who knew exactly how big that moment was and took advantage of it. I absolutely loved that from Carson Beck. And when you talk about managing that game, Carson was efficient, and most importantly, didn't commit any turnovers because, again, that's exactly what Miami needed. He goes 19 for 26 for 138 yards, a touchdown, 0 interceptions. And, of course, 0 interceptions was something his counterpart on Ohio State was not able to do. So we'll talk a little bit more about Miami's balance and Miami's physicality as we continue to review. This is, without question, this is Miami's biggest victory in 24 years, folks. I mean, you go back to the win at the Rose Bowl against Nebraska, January of 2002. Probably some of you listening to this weren't even alive then. If we got college students listening to this, you're like, what is 2002? Miami winning that national title against Nebraska. This is the biggest victory they've gotten since, and we continue to break it down on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. You want to keep it locked. Oh, and folks, for those who saw Miami at plus 9.5 and you took advantage on FanDuel, I know you're glad you did. And folks, Fridays is coming up. We're Friday Eve right now. Fridays already feel different during basketball season, and FanDuel is making them even better because every Friday night before the games tip off, FanDuel gives fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame, a limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action starts. Folks, Fridays from 6 to 7:30 Eastern have become appointment viewing with NBA Happy Hour. Opening the FanDuel app during Happy Hour always brings something new. Special boosts, bonuses, other surprises. It's easy to check out the weekly special before tip-off and make a move before the window closes. The timing is perfect. It happens right before the games, right before the big weekend starts, and it adds extra energy to Friday night basketball without overthinking it. So before tip-off, check on FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour. Every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern, a little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen, and for the everydayers. This is the perfect time to join the Everydayer Club because we got big plans for 2026. New year comes with new content, new opportunities. If you want to join, you click the link in the show notes below to the All Access tier. All Access tier gives you folks exclusive episodes, exclusive one-on-one text access with me, an exclusive newsletter, written content that I add. Everydayer Club can be joined. Make sure you hit that All Access tier at lockedoncanes.supercast.com. That's lockedoncanes.supercast.com. I know the everydayers out there are absolutely going to love it. Miami did things to the defending national champs that had not been done before, at least not in years, at least not during this, great window that Ohio State has been on during the recent Ryan Day era and the Jeremiah Smith era of the past 2 years. And, JJ played really well, by the way. I hope Jeremiah Smith woke up this morning thinking, man, did I really make the right choice turning my back on my hometown? Gabby Urrutia from Inside the U had this amazing X post that just perfectly summarized the situation last night, because a lot of Ohio State's best players are players from where? South Florida, Dayton, Broward County. Like a lot of Ohio State's best players, just credit to them. Ryan Day and his staff, Brian Hartline, who's the outgoing offensive coordinator, is going to USF, so he's going to keep recruiting the area. Although, USF, you get different talent than the Miamis of the world are getting. But they've recruited South Florida so well. And Gabby Urrutia wrote this X post. He said, Ohio State's roster is littered with kids from South Florida who didn't believe the vision of Mario Cristobal in Miami. They just got beat by the group who did. Yeah, so you think about the Jeremiah Smiths of the world who, he didn't trust Miami. He didn't trust that this could be a championship caliber team. Didn't trust he could win or get developed here. The Malachi Tonys, the Rueben Bain Juniors, the Mark Fletcher Juniors, who was, committed to Ohio State. The South Florida kids who did choose to invest in themselves, gamble on themselves and on their hometown team, are now reaping the benefits. God bless him. And listen, I'm not going to say Jeremiah Smith has failed at football because he's going to be a first-round pick next year, and he won a championship already at Ohio State. But you could have done that in your hometown. Can you imagine Jeremiah Smith last year with Cam Ward? Miami probably would have won a title last year, and they'd be on their way maybe to number 2 this year. But it is what it is. We can't change the past. But as I mentioned, Miami did things to Ohio State that had not been done before. When Miami was up 14-0 early in the game, that was Ohio State's largest deficit in 3 years. Miami finished the game with 24 points. The Buckeyes this season had not given up more than 16 points in any game. 16 points in a win against Illinois was the most Ohio State had given up. Yeah, when I made my game prediction, and I had it Miami 23-17, I was getting a lot of flack from Ohio State fans who were like, look at this Miami idiot. Doesn't this guy know that Ohio State is not capable of giving up more than 16 points in a game? You think Miami, who only scored 10 points against Texas A&M, is going to score more than 20 against our Buckeyes? Maybe I knew something, guys. And I also did say, because I know that wasn't all Miami's offense. If you guys listened to the shows that we did pregame on Wednesday, for those who are locked on Canes everydayers, you remember I did say Miami's going to break that 16-point magic number, but part of that is going to come from either a special teams or a defensive touchdown. I said that. I went on record with that. And Miami got exactly that. The offense scored 17 points, but you got another 7 courtesy of Keionte Scott in the pick 6. So it wasn't all Miami's but even the 17 points that Miami's offense scored was more than Ohio State had given up all year. So that was huge for the Hurricanes. This was something that jumped out to me in the first half. So Ohio State, again, they have so many talented players. Their linebacker, Sonny Styles, up until last night, had not been credited with a missed tackle all season up until Mark Fletcher ran him over, broke a tackle. That was Sonny Styles' first missed tackle all year. Mark Fletcher, former Buckeyes commit, he did that to him. Ohio State had the best third down offense in the country heading into last night at 55% conversion rate. Miami holds them to 3 for 10, 30%. Job well done by Miami on third down. Both sides of the football, by the way. The offense did a good job as well, but the defense was tremendous on third down. Here's a quote from Carson Beck. Folks, when we talk about the resilience, because again, Miami wins this game and they advance to the Final Four of college football, not just because they're the most physical team, because we've seen physical teams before not get as far as Miami's getting right now and not going through the gauntlet Miami's already gone through. It's the physicality, but it's also the balance. Because, folks, again, a big difference in this football game was Miami was able to get the running game going. And I mentioned Ohio State gave up only 85 rushing yards per game. Miami goes off for 153. Like, Miami was able to create balance. That helps them win this game. But also the resilience. I mean, this is a team, they have faced adversity at times all season long, and they've overcome it now. Here's what Carson Beck said after the game about that. Beck said, quote, "The way this team has responded to adversity, we knew coming into today that it wasn't going to be easy." That's a damn good football team on the other side right there. It was a battle. It took all 4 quarters until the very last minute, he said. I'm just so proud of how we fought adversity and just continued to fight throughout the game. Another thing, let's go back to the physicality for a second because I love this stat. Miami's running backs after contact. Hurricanes average 4.1 yards per carry, which is, okay. Really good rushing defense they faced. Mark Fletcher had 3.58 yards after contact, and Marty Brown had 3.6 yards after contact. So they're right there. Brown actually above his average after contact, and Fletcher right about at his average after contact. All right, let's revisit our keys to the game when we come back, because I always love to do this because, hey, before Miami, goes into battle, we tell you 4, 5, 6 keys to the game. We like to look back on it. What did Miami accomplish? I would say, I think 5 out of my 6 Miami accomplished with flying colors. They only failed at 1, but did they really? You want to keep it locked right here, folks. We're not done yet on this celebratory New Year's Day CFP 24-14 win against Ohio State episode of Locked On Canes. You want to keep it locked. So Miami is off to Arizona to face, either Georgia or Ole Miss, right? May the best team win when they slug it out on New Year's night. But you're going to be able to find tickets to that national semifinal game on the Game Time app. College football is the absolute best. Tailgates, packed stadiums, but usually getting tickets, at least it used to be this way, was the most frustrating part, with long queues, logins, prices jumping at checkout. But that's why Game Time gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to unlock amazing college football tickets and experiences in just a few taps. Folks, I love being able to, on the Game Time app, see my view from my seat before buying, so I know exactly where I'm sitting and what I'm looking at. Seeing college football tickets starting as low as $25 makes it easy to plan a game day trip. And I'm sure we're going to get the best possible deals at Game Time. We had deals around $40 on game day for the Cotton Bowl last night. And knowing that the prices include all fees up front makes the whole process stress-free. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create your account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Thank you for making Locked On Canes your first listen as we react to this 24-14 win against the Ohio State Buckeyes. And we're going to talk about how far this program has come. Because, guys, you remember, prior to the Cristobal era and even the first couple of years of the Cristobal era, because there was a full rebuild that happened, you think about like the Al Golden, I hate to even say that name out loud, the Mark Richt days, Rick did a little bit better of a job at the Manny Diaz days. When Miami used to play in games like this, right, you'd match up against Alabama, or you'd match up against peak Clemson or LSU in season opening games. Miami used to go out there in games against opponents like this, and they would get embarrassed, right? Like, you think about now, Miami is doing the embarrassing. I feel like Walter White in Breaking Bad. Now I am the one who knocks. Like, Miami is now the one that goes out there and out muscles opposing teams. And it's just a wonderful time to be alive. Now, here's how Miami did in terms of Donno's keys to the game against Ohio State. Now, the first most important key was putting pressure on Ohio State quarterback Julian Sayin, making him uncomfortable. Check. Miami did that. They passed that test with flying colors. 5 sacks, 2 interceptions, 7 tackles for loss. Julian Sayin was, he didn't look so happy to be playing the game he loves, especially during the first half of that football game. Miami gave him a tough time, and Hurricanes don't win that game without that dominant first half. And, of course, they found their dominance again in the fourth quarter, but they set the tone in that first half. Mission accomplished there. All right, the next one, I felt very strongly about this because, for as talented as Miami is, technically, Ohio State is the more talented team if you go by blue chip ratio, right? Like, how the percentage of their roster that were former 4- and 5-star recruits versus Miami's. Ohio State, highest blue chip ratio in the country. So I just thought against a team that is more talented on paper, you're going to need to win the turnover margin. Being even or losing the takeaway margin would not be good enough. Miami goes out there and they win the turnover margin. Hurricanes get 2 interceptions. They lost 1 fumble from Fletcher. And by the way, Fletcher completely redeemed himself. The same way Malachi Toney did against Texas A&M, had the fumble, scored the game-winning touchdown. Fletcher had a fumble, then scored a touchdown on the next drive. He was, big in setting up the final touchdown drive that Marty Brown scored. So Miami wins the takeaway battle 2-1. They're +1 in the turnover margin yesterday. Miami is now +12 on the season, which is sensational. And they had a pick 6 in the game. Check. The next key was score a defensive or special teams touchdown. Yes, thank you, Keionte Scott. The following key, establish the running game. And this one, to me, was huge because, we know Miami's pass rush is awesome, but Ohio State again, dangerous pass rushers. Caden Curry, 11 sacks on the year. A lot of the same things we heard about Texas A&M's defensive line coming in. You say the same things about Ohio State's, and they did sack Carson Beck twice. One of those was a coverage sack. It wasn't really about the pressure. It was about the coverage. But Miami did an awesome job taking some of that pressure off of their pass protection and off of their quarterback by establishing the running game. I thought that was non-negotiable, and the Hurricanes did that to the tune of 153 rushing yards. It was not just Mark Fletcher setting the tone. Gerard Pringle had some carries, fought for some yards. Marty Brown was awesome. Final drive, scores a touchdown. And Carson Beck, I mentioned him putting his body on the line. And it wasn't just the first down he picked up. There was also what should have been a first down that the officials, I think it was it an SEC crew or another Big 12 crew? I know it wasn't ACC refs, although they put on their ACC ref Halloween costumes for one of their official reviews, because they marked Beck short of a first down when he very clearly picked it up. I mean, I even saw the most biased Ohio State fans in my timeline that were like, yeah, we got away with one there, with them not giving Beck the first down. And, the officials weren't great last night. Thankfully, it didn't cost Miami the game. But Carson Beck was part of the running game yesterday. So they did that. Another one, I know our guy, the Truth Teller, was really big on this. Miami needed to take an early lead, right? You get the defending champs playing from behind. You take, Miami fans turned out great, by the way. It was probably 60-40 Ohio State fans. Ohio State has a massive alumni base and a bigger bandwagon than Miami has. So you expected more of their fans there. But for Miami to have about 40% of the fanfare, it's pretty darn good for our little old private school in Coral Gables. But, you wanted to keep the 60% of those Buckeye fans quiet early on, and Miami managed to do that by taking the early lead and punching Ohio State in the mouth. So I would say my only key to the game that Miami didn't actually do was generate explosive plays on offense, because Miami's largest chunk play from scrimmage was, I believe, 19 yards on a Mark Fletcher run. But they had so much control at the line of scrimmage that they did everything else. So they didn't really need to generate explosive plays in the game. All right, let's go some game balls here. First game ball, and I'm going to give out a lot today. Keionte Scott, pick 6, 4 tackles. Keionte Scott, seemingly every time he's been on the field for the Canes this year, has made game-changing plays. He's been tremendous, one of the best defensive backs in the country. You obviously give game balls to Akheem Mesidor and Rueben Bain. Miami's version of Batman and Robin. And it's not, sometimes Bain is Batman, sometimes Mesidor is Batman, but they're such a lethal duo. They combined for 3 sacks. Mesidor has 2, Bain has 1. Bain and Mesidor are both first-round quality players. I think Mesidor has probably played himself into the first round of the NFL draft. Another one on defense. I gave a game ball to Mo Toure. Mo Toure led Miami with 7 tackles, had a pass breakup. He was all over the field. Jacoby Thomas played hard, man. Not only did he have an interception to seal the game, but Jacoby made some really important plays in run support. And you could see how well, and Keionte Scott obviously does this, but Jacoby Thomas, he just reads the game so well. He continues to be such a great positive for Miami. Flipping over to the offense, you give a game ball to Mark Fletcher. Had the early fumble in the red zone, was able to redeem himself after that, scores the 9-yard touchdown reception later in the first half. He set up Miami's final drive where Marty Brown was able to score the TD. So Fletcher was tremendous, leads Miami in rushing with 90 yards. I give game balls to CJ Daniels and Keelan Marion at receiver, because coming into this game, and they talked about this on the broadcast, we knew that other receivers would have to step up because Ohio State was going to focus on Malachi Toney. Like, Ohio State was not going to allow Malachi to be the guy that beat them. And so in order for Miami to overcome the extra attention on baby Jesus, you had to have the other guys step up, and they did. Daniels was Beck's go-to target in the game with 5 receptions for 49 yards. Marion had 5 receptions for 36 yards. I'll give a game ball to Carson Beck. And again, like, people who just watch the box scores are like, why? 138 passing yards? Yeah. Carson Beck managed the game like the veteran quarterback that he is. I said during the week, and people gave me flack for this, that I would rather have Carson Beck over Julian Sayin for this particular game, because Sayin is a first-year starter, had never played in a game of this magnitude. Beck has played so many big games as a six-year senior. Sayin throws 2 interceptions. Beck takes care of the football. Carson was clutch on the most important of downs. Miami goes 7 for 14 on third down. Like, to go 50% against that defense is sensational. 7 for 14 on third down, 1 for 1 on fourth down, and the fourth down conversion was tremendous. Carson Beck to Malachi Toney. So Beck gets a game ball. And I give a game ball to Carter Davis, Miami's kicker. You talk about overcoming adversity. After the week that he had against Texas A&M, Carter Davis in this one, he hits his extra points, and he drilled a 49-yard field goal. So people were doubting Davis after he went 1 for 4 against the Aggies. But, yeah, it turns out that was definitely the wind against Texas A&M. It wasn't the kicker. It was the wind. And in Dallas, indoors, you had no wind. And Carter Davis showed you how good of a kicker he is. I want to give credit, so much credit to Mario Cristobal with what he's building, because it's still, it's never finished, right? What he's building, but what he's built to this point. No matter what happens from this point forward, and obviously we want to win the whole thing. Like, bring on Georgia, bring on Ole Miss, bring on whoever. But to this point, this Miami team has already proven that they belong this year among college football's elite as one of the final 4 teams left standing. In 4 seasons back at his alma mater, Mario Cristobal has built one of the deepest, most physical rosters in the country. He does that in just 4 years. Now, transfer portal helps, but also going out there, bringing in 25, 30 recruits and a lot of blue chippers every cycle, that helps. This has been an incredible rebuild. And just to give some perspective on the rebuild, and listen, I'm not saying this is the best rebuild of all time, or because you look at what Curt Cignetti has done in 2 seasons at Indiana is like, it's faster than most rebuilds would be, right? But in the case of Miami, we used to talk a lot about comparing Mario Cristobal at Miami to Steve Sarkisian at Texas, right? That Mario's rebuild, we hoped it would kind of mirror what Sark did in his first 4 years at Texas, where he's able to get them into the playoffs, right? Miami now has surpassed what the Longhorns did in Sark's first 4 years. Credit to Mario Cristobal for that. 2 games now into Miami's postseason run, Hurricanes have already had a harder road than anyone in the current playoff bracket, having to go through number 7 Texas A&M on the road and then going up against the defending national champs. And, in that game, defending national champs, right up until a couple hours before kickoff, Ohio State were 9.5-point favorites in the game. Now, money came in on Miami late, and obviously the wise guys were wise about that. But, with Miami being 9.5 dogs to 7.5 dogs, biggest underdogs of the quarterfinal round, and Miami's already gotten through. Incredible. So whether the Canes face Georgia or Ole Miss next round, I don't think anybody's going to be sleeping on Miami this time around. Like, people were sleeping on Miami because a lot of folks thought, hey, maybe Miami can win in the trenches, but they can't win the actual game. That was a lot of what the national analysts were saying. Like, hey, I like Miami's O-line and D-line, but I like Ohio State to win the game. No one's going to be doubting Miami. And, obviously, if you go up against Georgia, which for my money, is the team that's been in the best form lately and looks like the best team in the country, Miami's probably going to be an underdog, but I don't think people are going to doubt Miami the same way they doubted them this time around. If Miami can keep this run going, they would be the most battle-tested team in the history of the college football playoff. So let's keep it rolling. And I don't think Mario Cristobal would have it any other way, by the way. I think he loves that bulletin board material, that underdog, us against the world mentality. I think he likes being the underdog. And last thing I'm going to say, folks, because last night, beating Ohio State, exercising those 23-year-old demons that those of us had, that was significant. Now, I know Miami's players and coaches, they were only focused on the present, right? They were only thinking about 2025 Miami versus 2025 Ohio State. They weren't thinking about 2002, the 03 Fiesta Bowl. But to all the Miami fans, myself included, and I know most of you listening to this, for those of us who witnessed that robbery of Terry Porter throwing that flag in the Fiesta Bowl and literally taking a championship away from the Hurricanes. Thank you to Mario Cristobal, to his players, his staffers. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts for going out on that field in Dallas last night and getting payback. Even if payback for the Fiesta Bowl wasn't your intention, it created that for every Miami fan. Every Miami fan who's had to live 23 years with that robbery. You did us a solid last night. Whether that was your intention or not, you accomplished it. Thank you so much to the Everydayers. Make sure you join the Everydayer Club. Link below or lockedoncanes.supercast.com. It's a great way to start the new year together. Thank you so much for making us your first listen. Smash that like button. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Subscribe on YouTube, wherever you get your pods. And let's keep enjoying this one. We'll talk to you next time on another episode of Locked On Canes. We are part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.